So a few weeks ago, I had an opportunity to go out to Arizona for the first time. And like most of us, I'm sure at this point, I hadn't realized how much I was craving to just have a different experience anywhere. I don't care where. So, um, so I was reminded that, there was a point when we could go anywhere, anytime, all the time. I can get in my car and go. I can drive anywhere. And it wasn't until we couldn't go anywhere that I realized, oh, I forgot to go somewhere. I was supposed to do something else. And so when I got close to that trip, I was like a panther walking along the confinement. I'm like, get me out of here. So my only real reference for the desert in the Southwest is old Westerns on TV, which were largely filmed there because it's every bit as rugged as it was looking from my window in the plane. I couldn't believe this area could sustain life. Where did the cowboys get their food anyway? In the midst of all that nothingness, I started to see big green circles below. We were flying low enough that I could try to make out what they were. They seemed to be crop circles, big gardens with an irrigation system in the center that would kind of go out like a wheel and water all the plants. And I was thinking like a donkey in the old Westerns that would walk around and grind corn or something or be pulling water up from a well. So from what I could see compared to that, these guys were doing an awesome job with the efficiency of making their crops grow. So the reason for my trip out there was to visit my practitioner classmates with whom I had been in school for 2 years online. We'd never actually met in real life because we're supposed to have a retreat at the end of each year, and of course we did not because of COVID. So we decided to do it ourselves anyway, and it was wonderful. If you've never had the experience of meeting someone that you've only known online, it's amazing because you've known them. You know them. You know them better than you probably would if you knew them in person. So I'm really glad we did that. And I hope more of us will do that. We'll have the courage to meet people we only know in cyberspace. But after the retreat, I was invited to go stay with my friend, my classmate Beverly, where she lives in the southwest corner of Arizona, kind of on the border of California and Mexico. This area is a part of the Sonoran Desert, and it's surrounded by mountains, those craggy ones, that only the best cowboys could ride their horses up in there, because, they knew what to do. So we would take Beverly's dogs for a walk out into the desert, and there were these vast swaths of tin cans out there, and a lot of them were opened with that kind of can opener. So I assume they were probably beer from long ago. But of course, the only thing I could think of was the scene in Blazing Saddles, the bean scene around the campfire. And if you don't know what that's about, ask me later. So as I stood out there, everything was so wide open. I mean, the sky never ends, and neither does the ground. The desert just goes, and it's all one big thing, and it makes me not surprised that some people thought that the world was flat, because if you just look at it that way, it looks flat. So you can go anywhere. You can point yourself and just go, except in one place. When Beverly asked me what I wanted to do while I was out there, I asked, would it be possible to go see the border wall? So the next day, I was strapped into this little dune buggy thing, like a race car driver. They assured me that it could handle any terrain, and so we went out onto a military base there that allows you to go out with a permit. And so we drove and drove and drove, and there were signs along the way that said, yeah, you might want to stay on the road because there might be some undetonated explosive devices around. So, like, okay. Eyes on where we're going. But if you think people out there are rugged, they're nothing compared to the plant life in the desert. They have those big saguaro cactuses, and they're prickly and proud, and they stand there in the sun like, you can't do it. You can't get me. I'm here. But eventually the outer layer burns away, and there's a skeleton left inside. It's kind of like bones, just all combined together, tied up. There are also what are called ironwood trees, which when they have dead branches, they actually do look like iron. They look like wrought iron, and apparently they're just as hard. So and soon, when it's getting cooler, the things will start to turn green, and there will be flowers. And I tell you, you couldn't have paid me to think that that was true when I was out there. So we continued heading south for several more miles, and when I started to see what looked like the ocean in the distance, and I'm like, it was dark and flat, I guess the way a mirage would look if you were lost. And I realized it was actually the top of the wall. It was just going on and on and on. And as we got closer, it got taller. I could feel that the weight of those beams, intense, just stuck down in the ground. And it was something. This was another place I've only seen on TV, and I think of the term political football, and I go to, wonder if I could actually kick a football over the fence. These are the kinds of weird thoughts that come up when you think you should be feeling something else, something more, but you don't. So honestly, I expected that, that standing there looking at that fence would feel profound. But as I looked through, I saw a pickup truck driving along the other side in Mexico, and I thought, well, how'd he get over there? I was like, okay. So I started thinking about this talk on the way back from seeing the wall. I've revised it at least 5 times because every direction I took seemed to lead me to sort of a dead end. I just wander off. I'd be in the story, and then something else would come up, some other idea, some wide open, anything I think is not all there is. There's so much more. So, but it's hard to live life without a sense of navigation. And that's why the ancients learned to read the stars, and I think that's what's on my pants. I've decided these are the stars in the black night. What might have seemed to us like aimless wandering for them was actually a perfectly guided map. It allowed them to create a boundaried path to travel that would provide the greatest abundance and safety for the tribe. So in this teaching, we talk about how we navigate with words like limitlessness and abundance as qualities of the one source of all there is. Their meanings imply infinite possibility and open-ended promise. This source knows no time, and the Native Americans have tried to teach us that there is no need to hoard or guard resources. Following the North Star would lead them to migrate along with the rest of nature and return with the stars. They know that the stars belong to no one and to everyone. They recognize that the law of abundance is a truth of nature, and it is ever present. And on an aside, speaking of abundance, Beverly told me that what they refer to out there as Arizona roadkill is boxes of already packaged produce that fall off the trucks as they come out of the fields. So she and her friends will pull over and pick up broccoli and cauliflower, and they bring it back to the neighborhood and just give it to the neighbors. Much the way maybe in a tribal hunt, the resources would be shared amongst the tribe. So what does oneness mean in the shadow of a boundary that won't even accommodate drop kicking a head of lettuce over it? On a spiritual level, what does that boundary represent? So I'll circle back again to the crops. The idea of planting over the whole desert may seem like limitlessness, but that barren land has its own purpose. It may not look like it's sustaining life, but that's only because we don't know how to recognize its expression. Those who have lived on this land for thousands of years have thrived because they learned how to follow the entire system of nature, not just their small part in it. From my own perspective, I see the farmers putting use to the accumulated knowledge of the ages, the infinite wisdom of the co-creative process that has for countless millennia sustained life in some of the harshest conditions imaginable. But even there, inhabitants found ways to describe the experience of awe. because everything they needed seemed to show up as they discovered new ways to use it. They were masters at managing their resources. Spiritual limitlessness is the ability to comprehend oneness with all of life and the laws that govern it. It's knowing that there is no physical human boundary that can create separation from the allness of God. I seem to remember a story a while back about a little boy who kicked a ball over the top of a barrier wall. And a few minutes later, the ball came back. It was seen as the innocence of someone who didn't know he wasn't supposed to do that. But it was also a symbol of the truth that no matter how high we build the walls between ourselves and others, we can never hold back a healing whose time has come. As noted spiritual teacher Michael Beckwith writes in his book, Life Visioning, where there is willfulness, there is a wall. Where there is willingness, there is a way. Maybe that's how we can all reach out past our sense of personal limitation and discover that there never was any limitation, that the perceived separation between ourselves and others was a manifestation of fear. All that we needed was a change of view, a higher perspective. That's where Martin Luther King Jr. was when he gave his final sermon on the night before he was killed. He told the audience, "We've got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't really matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that as a people, we will get to the promised land." It was a nod to Moses up on Mount Sinai, where it is recorded that he found the 10 Commandments of the Old Testament in the Bible, written in stone. And that was just one of the many ways ancient cultures tried to create a sense of cohesion and shared values. Every civilization throughout the ages has a story about what peace and plenty mean to them, and they always point to the shared effort and commitment, even when abundance shows up only as a head of romaine lettuce on a dusty highway. The farmer's loss on paper is not in vain if the produce doesn't spoil. Dr. King was reminding us to keep climbing and adjusting our perceptions as we go higher. The farmer's circles expand little by little as more growth becomes possible, and the mountaintop is attained one step at a time. Relationships are mended with a single word of understanding. Limitlessness is not a mandate. It's the freedom to adjust and change according to our willingness to grow and allow for new perspectives. Oneness is the view from the mountaintop. It is the recognition that each person, every moving part of the universe, is serving its own unique purpose, and we can do little more than observe someone else's process. I may never comprehend what I see as the brutality of being a cactus exposed to an environment that I myself could not survive. But I also know that I could probably not convince a cactus that it would thrive here in water-saturated Florida. We all bloom when we are planted in the soil and sand that best supports our individual natures. That nature is our connection to the creative intelligence of life. Some of us jump around trying to follow a spotlight that keeps moving, like a cat with a laser light. It's fun for a while, but at some point, Kitty decides it's not worth the effort and walks away, and that's why cats are smart. But that's the very surrender we need to experience in order for true nature to become apparent. That surrender says, take a break. Stop trying so hard. The light is seeking you. It's not trying to get away from you. Don't spend all your energy chasing it. Be still and know that a solution is waiting for your vibration to align with it to create your fullest expression. The garden that is you understands what to do. Give it what it needs and wait. My understanding of a part of our country that I was previously unfamiliar with has expanded. I've started to listen to podcasts about the history of our country. I've climbed a little higher on those craggy mountains where I see people below against whom I have held a grudge or boundary. I see people who will never meet one another, fighting over ideologies born of ignorance of each other. In this place, I can see a higher possibility for those relationships and know that any boundaries keeping us apart are not the truth of who we are. Oneness is the belief that everything is indeed connected, whether we can perceive it or not. I can allow myself to be those big steel beams creating separation between myself and another, or I can be that red rubber ball sailing innocently across time and space to prove that no edifice is any match for the truth that nothing we can build can compete with the view from the mountaintop. In closing, I want to thank Elaine for helping me climb another personal hill. In February 1964, two momentous events occurred. I was born, and the Beatles came to America. My brothers got guitars, and my sisters learned to scream at the new band. My brother Steve has faced a number of challenges that resulted in his living in a care facility for 27 years. He just turned 70 this summer. He's a blackbird with a broken wing in our family, but up there he's been able to live out his legacy as the lost Beatle. It was John, Paul, George, Ringo, and Steve. Within this boundaried existence for him, he's been able to stop wandering like a cactus that forgot he lives in the desert. He has the electric guitar, an amp, and I'm hoping for his fellow residents a set of earphones. Steve's passion has always sort of outmeasured his abilities, but he loves what he does, and he plays for his friends. And that's what he always wanted to be when he grew up. So he lives in an old, it was a tuberculosis sanatorium up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And so they've turned it into a facility for people who need a little extra something, something. So, but there's a beautiful quote from the movie, A River Runs Through It. I love this movie. It is so beautiful. But it makes me think of Steve, where actor Tom Skerritt, who plays the Presbyterian minister father of the story's author, Norman McLean. The quote references the character of McLean's younger brother, who was played by Brad Pitt. There you go, Lori. Whose death after a fast and loose life leaves those around him lost for an answer. Reverend McLean says, "Each of us here today will at one time in our lives look upon a loved one who is in need and ask the same question. We are willing to help, Lord, but what, if anything, is needed? For it is true that we can seldom help those closest to us. Either we don't know what part of ourselves to give, or more often than not, the part we have to give is not wanted. And so it is those we live with and should know who elude us. But we can still love them. We can love completely without complete understanding." So what I've been reminded of in these past weeks is that as we learn to manage the growth within our own circles, our own personal boundaries, or our hula hoops, as Reverend Lane likes to call them, we're able to expand to accommodate new information, new experiences, a new life in a way that stretches rather than strains our nature. Our boundaries don't exist just to keep us safe. They are there to help us define and direct our growth in the most powerful ways possible. And so it is.